Human error is also to blame for the nuclear accident at Japan's Fukushima nuclear reactor. That's according to an investigation panel from Japan's parliament, which calls the disaster man-made. The panel said it can't be sure that the tsunami and earthquake were the major causes of the accident. The panel also criticized the response of the plant operator, Tokyo Electric Power Company, regulators, and then the prime minister at the time, Naoto Kan. Kan resigned last year after criticism of his handling of the natural disaster. In an effort to repair public trust, the government will set up a more independent nuclear watchdog that will draft new safety measures. However, the Japanese government has brought on a reactor at the OE plant back online, and another OE reactor is set to restart later this month. For more analysis on how human error played a part in one of the worst nuclear disasters in history, I'm joined by Navin Nayak. He's the senior vice president of the League of Conservation Voters. And this was really kind of a stinging indictment. I was just looking at some of the passages, some of the words that just jump off the page. Ignorance, arrogance, unforgivable. What's your take on all of this?
You know, I think the people were pretty surprised at some level that this report came out just days after, especially the first reactor gets restarted. I think it is a real indictment of not only the government, but of the Tokyo Electric Power Company and of the regulators. I think that's the really scary part here, is that the whole sequence here is really frightening. We should have had this report come out first before the government made this decision to start nuclear power up again. And I think the fact that, you know, they're very clear that this was a man-made catastrophe that could have been avoided or certainly not been as bad as it was. And the fact that a lot of the things that they've highlighted as part of the problem have not yet been addressed, which is flawed regulation, not being prepared for earthquakes. In fact, the Ohi reactor, which just restarted, is actually near a seismic fault. And so you have seismologists in Japan themselves that are saying this is a huge risk that they're taking again.
Well, let me pick out another passage. We found a disregard for global trends, a disregard for public safety, and then, of course, they really go after the power company, saying that they singled them out for cost-cutting measures instead of worrying about public safety. And when you look at capitalism and you start thinking about this industry and how we see capitalism, you know, with these large corporations trying to squeeze the dollar when they can, what's the takeaway, not just in Japan, but globally?
Well, I mean, I think this is another great reminder right now of the importance of regulators. I feel like in the last few years, whether it's Wall Street, whether it's the housing industry, and certainly when it's something like nuclear power that has put in Japan 150,000 people having forced to be evacuated, if it says anything, is the importance of needing a cop on the beat, a regulator that's independent, that's able to actually do its job. And I think what you see in Japan and what this report really suggests is that the regulators were actually just kind of going along. They were in collusion, the report says often, with the industry. And you see a lot of that, unfortunately, globally, where the people that are actually responsible for the safety of these plants have very, very close ties, often used to work in the industry. And this is a real concern for people from a safety perspective.
You were talking about the OE plant and how the Prime Minister, in a sense, said that his hand was forced. They need the energy. And yet there is so many protests going on in the country right now ahead of this report. What's this likely to do in terms of fueling that, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of concern that they rushed putting this plant back online precisely because they were concerned about the report. I mean, I think the timing is really going to raise a lot more concerns. As you mentioned, this was a very controversial decision. A lot of people are not comfortable with starting these plants. And then to have this indictment come out a few days after the first plant starts, I think there's going to be a lot of concern with what the next steps are.
Well, we'll keep our eye on it. Navin Nayak, thanks for coming in and talking to us tonight. Certainly appreciate it.
Mike.